It's May 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with North Korea's plan to launch a satellite. The North notified Japan that it plans to launch a space rocket carrying a satellite sometime between today and June 3rd. Kyodo News reported the regime designated 3 areas where debris will fall. Leaders of South Korea, Japan, and China are holding their first Trilateral summit in more than 4 years. The 3 sides will broadly see cooperation in 6 areas, from the economy to people-to-people exchanges. At least 15 people have been killed after tornadoes and storms ripped through the central U.S. Millions more people are at risk as these storms continue to move east. North Korea has announced its plans to launch a satellite between today and the 4th of June. The notice on the 8-day window came right before a summit meeting of leaders of South Korea, Japan, and China taking place here in Seoul. Our North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
Another satellite launch warning by North Korea was issued early on Monday. Japan's Coast Guard received an email from the North that it plans to launch an artificial satellite between Monday and June 4th. Pyongyang also gave notice of 3 locations of potential danger following the launch. The projectile will likely fall in one of 3 places, 2 of which are in the southwestern area of the West Sea and 1 in the Pacific Ocean east of the Philippines. Upon hearing the announcement, nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan held a phone conversation early on Monday. The Foreign Ministry Director General for North Korean Nuclear Affairs, Lee Jun-il, spoke with his U.S. counterpart Chung Bak, as well as Hiroyuki Namazu of Japan. The 3 confirmed that any launch by Pyongyang using ballistic missile technology, even for the purpose of launching a satellite, is a clear violation of the UN Security Council resolution. They said they would demand that North Korea does not go ahead with the launch. The 3 also agreed to continue to work closely with each other to strengthen deterrence and coping capabilities. North Korea previously launched a satellite back in November, which successfully entered orbit after failures in May and August. South Korean intelligence authorities said Pyongyang got help from Russia after the November launch. On Sunday, Yonhap News reported, citing a senior defense official, that a large number of Russian experts have entered the North to support its satellite launch efforts, saying a launch could be imminent ahead of the Trilateral summit between Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
For the first time in 4.5 years, South Korea, Japan, and China are getting together for a trilateral summit. Now, South Korea is the host nation this time, and the 3-way talks are about to kick off here in Seoul. For more on this, we have our Kim Do-young from the Yongsan Presidential Office. Do-young, walk us through today's agenda.
Tommy, that's right. As you said, the 3-way talks will begin in a few moments. Now, this is the 9th such meeting since its first one in 2008 in Japan. We saw Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese Premier Li Qiang land here in Seoul yesterday. According to the top office, the aim is fully restoring and normalizing through a 3-way cooperation. Take a listen to what the top office had to say as the host nation.
The ultimate goal of trilateral cooperation, as envisioned by our government, is to foster an environment where the people of the 3 countries can trust each other, engage in active exchanges, and operate in a healthy and safe manner. By doing so, we aim to promote economic development and improve the quality of life for all 3 nations.
South Korea has been actively seeking breakthrough points to make this happen for some time. Keep in mind that this comes on top of tensions in the Indo-Pacific region as the United States and China engage in geopolitical competition. And while South Korea and Japan have strengthened cooperation with the U.S., China has certainly not shown a positive response. As for the event itself, there will be a joint press conference along with a joint statement. The 3 nations will also hold a business summit where we will see business leaders from the 3 countries join the leaders.
So, Do-young, this much anticipated joint statement is believed to be a key part of this summit. What do we know about it so far?
That's right. I mean, there has been much speculation coming into this summit as to what will be the details of the joint statement. Take a look at this chart from what we know so far. The three are expected to focus on 6 main areas of cooperation, including people-to-people exchanges, climate change and sustainable development, health and aging demographics, as well as science and technology and disaster and safety response. Of course, the North Korea issue will be one of the most important topics touched on during the meeting as well. An official told reporters last night that there were only a couple times that joint statements following a trilateral summit by the three didn't address North Korean activities. So it's likely that it will be included on this one as well. But the official also said the exact level of words were still being discussed late, and they will continue late into the night last night. So we will see when the details come out. Tommy?
All right, thank you, Doyon, for that report today. Now, ahead of the much-anticipated talks, President Yoon held separate bilateral meetings, beginning with Chinese Premier Li Qiang. After a month-long tension between Seoul and Beijing, the two agreed to restart strategic dialogue and cooperation. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea and China will form a new security dialogue and resume free trade agreement negotiations, signaling a major move to thaw their frosty diplomatic relations. This came as South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang on Sunday, a day before their trilateral summit with Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida. Seoul's Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-ho said Yoon and Lee agreed to establish a new high-level diplomatic and security dialogue in a 2+2 format of defense and foreign affairs officials. The inaugural session is scheduled for mid-June. The two sides also decided to resume Phase 2 negotiations on the South Korea-China Free Trade Agreement. The discussions will aim to expand the trade of goods to include sectors such as culture, tourism and legal services. The two sides are also set to launch an export control dialogue to strengthen supply chain cooperation and revive an investment cooperation committee after 13 years. Yoon and Lee further agreed to bolster people-to-people exchanges and jointly address transnational crimes such as drug trafficking, fraud and illegal gambling. The range of agreements to strengthen communication and cooperation follows months-long tension between the two countries, which largely began after Beijing in 2016 rolled out economic measures to punish South Korean businesses over Seoul's decision to deploy a US missile defense system to deter North Korea's growing nuclear and missile capabilities. In recent months, Beijing has also slammed Seoul and Tokyo as they strengthen their relations and trilateral cooperation with the United States in not only security but also supply chains and cutting-edge technologies. Yoon and Lee agreed on the need for mutual respect and communication to improve their bilateral ties.
저는 한중 양국이 우리의 양자 관계뿐만이 아니라 국제사회의 평화와 번영을 위해 긴밀하게 협력해야 한다고 생각합니다. 최근 양국 간에 다양한 분야에서 장관급 대화가 재개되고 지방 정부 간 교류도 활성화되고 있습니다. 양국이 앞으로도 계속 교류와 협력을 강화하고 서로 존중하며 공동 이익을 추구해 나가기를 희망합니다.
The Chinese side would like to work together with South Korea to become good, trustworthy neighbors and partners who support each other to achieve success.
While Yoon and Lee mainly focused on economic issues, with limited time for more sensitive geopolitical matters, a presidential official told reporters that Yoon addressed North Korea's nuclear capabilities and military cooperation with Russia. In recent years, Beijing and Moscow have vetoed about a dozen Security Council attempts to slap stronger sanctions on Pyongyang, despite its growing belligerence. Yoon urged China to fulfill its role as a bastion of peace and as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. His official warned North Korea's launch of a military reconnaissance satellite using intercontinental ballistic missile technology looks imminent, with the regime possibly carrying out other missile provocations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon on Sunday also met with Japanese Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida as their government agreed to form new dialogue channels on hydrogen and resource cooperation. Having restored their diplomatic and trade relations fully last year, the two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to improving bilateral relations in the fields of energy, economic security, advanced technology, and supply chains. They welcomed the establishment of new dialogue channels to manage and coordinate policies on hydrogen technology, ammonia, and natural resources. And during the 50-minute meeting, Yoon also raised the recent controversy over messenger app Line's ownership, saying he understands the Japanese authorities had not pressured South Korea's neighbor to divest its stakes and said it shouldn't become a diplomatic sticking point. Kishida said Tokyo's administrative guidance was simply a request to renew Line's security system due to a serious security breach. He added that the South Korean and Japanese governments have been cooperating well on this issue from the preliminary stage and would continue to do so. The leaders of South Korea, Japan, and China will have their own separate meeting today. Now, what tangible outcome is expected to come out from the three-way talks? For more, we're joined by Professor Han Charo. Good morning.
Good morning, Dami.
Thanks for joining us. In what way is it meaningful that the three sides have managed to put their heads together after more than 4 years?
Well, it's about time, I think. I've been eagerly awaiting the return to talks here. Of course, the COVID pandemic delayed summits initially, and there have also been unresolved tensions among these three countries as well. As mentioned in your earlier reports, the whole THAAD missile defense issue was, in some respects, restricting dialogue between South Korea and China. It's also good, I think, and we could see this with the bilateral talks yesterday, that some of the sticking points among the three countries were discussed one-to-one. China has put a ban on Japanese seafood in response to Japan's wastewater releases from the shuttered Fukushima nuclear plant. And I know the two leaders were set to talk about that. And of course, China has become further apart from Japan and South Korea now that they've been working more closely through the U.S. trilateral relationship and also through the G7 as well. So, bottom line is these three countries cannot escape working with each other. It's important that they talk. And I think China especially is highly motivated to talk a lot for economic reasons at this point in time, too, because the economic relationships here are key. I think that will be something to watch as the three leaders talk all in one setting today.
And what Seoul's top office couldn't stress enough was that the trilateral meetup will secure, momentum for three-way cooperation and benefits that people in those three countries can actually, feel and enjoy. The question is, what could they be?
Right, that is the big question going in. One possible answer would be, can we see any movement toward a three-way trade deal? This is something that has been wished for quite some time now, maybe even more than a decade. And as the host of the summit, South Korea is driving this agenda, but we'll have to see if anything can move forward on that. I don't expect any breakthroughs in that regard, but I think Yi Chang, the premier of China, is very business-minded. It's significant, as your report pointed out, that there's also a business summit going on. So you might see economics take precedence in these talks, but there's a whole range of other issues that are being brought forward, from public health to how to deal with aging populations, an issue that all three countries are facing, disaster prevention measures. I noticed that climate change and sustainable development are on the agenda. What I didn't see specifically is whether the air pollution problems in this region are on the agenda. And that is something that honestly I wish would be discussed a little bit more fully with the three countries. So I would hope that they would take air pollution and bundle that into a larger set of issues, because more collective action is needed to try to ease that problem that affects daily life in all three of the countries. So that is one agenda that they certainly could push forward both today and maybe for further cooperation.
Definitely. And the presidential office said there won't be a clear-cut agreement on North Korea issues, but there are, Japanese reports saying there may be one between the three sides. Professor Shadow, what do you think? Will the three sides be able to reach a consensus on managing North Korea issues?
Well, North Korea's satellite launch that you've just announced and they've just announced this morning, the possibility of that impending, it's certainly, I think, time. The announcement was certainly time to try to take some attention, not only in the news coverage away from the summit, but also, I think, to try to get the leaders talking more about North Korea as well. It certainly puts this on the agenda, I think, for the summit. So whether any kind of breakthrough in North Korea could emerge without the US and even perhaps Russia without all the regional stakeholders at the table? That's a question in itself. But I think one thing that China, Japan, and South Korea can do is put forward a statement of agreement in principle that there should be no conflict on the Korean Peninsula, period, and also try to work in various ways with North Korea, restarting dialogue. In some respects, Japan is especially out in the cold with their relationship with North Korea. I know they've had some overtures to North Korea and North Korea too in the last year and a half, but more could be done in that regard. So Japan might want to be brought a little bit more fully into that larger context.
Professor Shadow, before I let you go briefly, will South Korea-Japan summit or South Korea-Japan-China summit be able to, alleviate U.S.-China tensions in any way?
Well, I don't think they can do that single-handedly without the U.S. there. And of course, South Korea can't necessarily solve a problem between two other countries. But what is interesting here is in its news coverage leading up to the summit, Xinhua News Agency, China's state-run news source, kept emphasizing that they are under pressure right now. China are under pressure with the U.S. Efforts to redirect the production of semiconductors back domestically. And I know that China is interested, I think, in forging more relationships in the tech sector, both with South Korea and Japan. So whether we see this meeting actually alleviating tensions between the U.S. and China is one thing, but I think China is looking to try to bring Korea and Japan closer in terms of forging greater economic ties to kind of give China another edge with respect to maybe a smaller down the road, slightly, relatively speaking, a smaller economic relationship with the U.S. But keep in mind that China and the U.S. still do a lot of business despite some of the economic and geopolitical tensions. And the whole relationship between China and the U.S. is very different, say, from the relationship between the U.S. and the Soviet Union during another period of geopolitical competition. The U.S. and China are much more interdependent, interconnected to begin with. So Japan and South Korea certainly fit in that larger web.
Indeed. All right, Professor Shadow, thank you so much for your insight this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me, Dami. Take care.
Dozens of people have reportedly been killed in an Israeli airstrike in the southern Gaza city of Rafah on Sunday, despite International Court of Justice call to halt attacks in the region. According to Palestinian health authorities, the Israeli ministry launched an airstrike on the Tal al-Sultan refugee camp west of Rafah, with Hamas putting to death to at least 30. A Palestinian Red Crescent Society spokesperson said the area that was attacked had been designated a humanitarian zone by the Israeli military. The Israeli military has not commented on the Rafah airstrike. Overseas Korean adoptees across the globe gathered here in Seoul last week. The Overseas Koreans Agency invited them to share their experiences, providing them with an opportunity to establish their identity as Koreans. Our Choi Soo-hyung has our story.
It took 50 years for Julia, born with the name Park Hae-kyung, to return to her birthplace.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I landed in Korea, I felt like I was coming home. It's almost like I felt it in every cell of my body that I had finally returned to where I belong.
She reunited with her birth family in February this year.
Our books begin at chapter 2. The introduction, the table of contents, the first few chapters are ripped out. So learning the story was valuable. Incredibly valuable, but I think more so just seeing their faces and seeing how much I look like them, and to feel a connection that's unlike I've ever felt.
Heidi, adopted by a U.S. family in 1974 when she was 6 months old, said that all her curiosity about Korea, which she had intentionally kept hidden, came flooding out all at once.
It just came at that pivotal moment for me. And as I was becoming a big fan of BTS, and I was starting to try to learn the language, everything kind of coincided. And it was that switch turned in, and I wanted to know all the stuff. It's this discovery of this other piece of who I am, and to be able to embrace that is very meaningful.
From Tuesday to Friday, the 2024 Overseas Korean Adoptees Gathering was held in Seoul by South Korea's Overseas Korean Agency. 96 people from 15 countries were invited to share their experiences as Korean adoptees. The agency stated that the adoptees should be treated as overseas Koreans, not just as adoptees.
Adoptee is unquestionably an overseas Korean and eligible for support from their homeland. The Overseas Koreans Agency aims to strengthen ties with adoptees worldwide in Korea. The agency will continue to promote gatherings like this conference to strengthen networks among overseas Koreans.
Julia Haegyong said that this gathering was very important in finding out her identity as Korean.
I would like to see us moving forward in this gathering to really establish a network globally with other adopted Korean organizations, while also building a relationship with the Overseas Koreans Agency and just feeling more connected to this country, our homeland, you know, the place of our origin.
During the conference, adoptees had the opportunity to experience Korean culture with their families, deepening their understanding of the country.
Adoptees visiting Korea experienced the cultural heritage of their birth country at the Korean Folk Village, a living museum featuring Korea's traditional lifestyles and performances.
The agency noted that adoptees' children are the ones who are actually embracing Korean culture more with their parents. Sophia, who loves K-pop and attended the conference with her mother, who was adopted by a Norwegian family, expressed feeling a genuine, familiar connection to Korean culture.
It was almost like there was a part of me that was empty, but I didn't really know until I kind of stepped off the plane. And I felt like this is another part of me that I have to kind of reconnect with. And she was actually the one pushing me a bit. So it's been like a common journey for us to try and connect more with Korean culture and language.
The Overseas Koreans Agency will help these adoptees not only in finding their birth family, but also in embracing their identity as overseas Koreans and passing down this heritage to future generations. Cha Hyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn off to stories from around the world. Tornadoes and storms ripped through central regions in the U.S. over Memorial Day weekend, killing at least 15 people, destroying buildings and houses, and cutting power to hundreds of thousands of residents. At least 7 people were killed in Cook County, Texas, including a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. At least 5 deaths were reported in Arkansas, 1 person was killed in Kentucky, and at least 2 people lost their lives in Oklahoma. Dozens of injuries were also reported across many states by local sheriff's offices. Some 500,000 residents across 7 states were also left without power by Sunday afternoon. The 108th running of the Indianapolis 500 car race was delayed by 4 hours on the same day as lightning, thunder, and heavy rain forced some 125,000 spectators to evacuate. The storms continued to push east on Sunday, potentially affecting millions more. Moving over to Papua New Guinea, where survivors of a massive landslide on Friday are still searching for missing relatives. The United Nations Migration Agency on Sunday increased its estimated death toll to more than 670 people. The head of the International Organization for Migration, Serhan Aktoprak, said that the agency's new estimates now show more than 150 houses possibly buried under the landslide. Aktoprak said that the isolated Enga province in the north of the island nation is still under threat from landslides, adding that rescuers are at risk. The landslide struck at around 3 a.m. local time on Friday, while many were still asleep. Qatar Airways flight QR017 flying from Doha to Dublin, Ireland on Sunday hit turbulence mid-flight, resulting in injuries for 12 passengers aboard. while Qatar Airways did not comment on the turbulence directly, saying that the matter is a subject to an internal investigation. The company released a statement saying that a small number of passengers and crew sustained minor injuries and are receiving treatment. Irish broadcaster RTE interviewed passengers arriving at the airport and said that the turbulence lasted for only around 20 seconds but occurred during the food and drink service. According to Dublin Airport, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner landed safely and as scheduled shortly before 1 p.m. local time. The 77th edition of the Cannes Film Festival has come to an end with the winners of the festival's top prize, the Palme D'Or, announced on Saturday. Anora, a dark romantic comedy and drama film directed by Sean Baker, won the Palme D'Or. It features the story of a young exotic dancer who becomes involved with a Russian oligarch's son, a storyline that continues the director's streak of sex worker-focused films. Baker said he dedicates his win to his cast and to all sex workers, past, present and future, saying that he hopes the audience understands how wonderful they are and gets them as much attention as possible. The second highest honor, the Grand Prix, was awarded to All We Imagine as Light by Indian director Payal Kapadia.
Good morning. Are we getting credit for a cloudy and wet weekend? Most parts are having lots of sunshine to start the new week, but it will be breezy with temperatures hovering below or right around the norms in most parts of the country. Sunshine will beam down, boosting UV rays to very high levels during the hottest parts of the day between noon and 3 p.m. So sun safety is a must. Meanwhile, parts of Gangwon-do province and Jeju will see more clouds than sunshine today. In brief, picture-perfect weather for most regions with comfortable temperatures. Central parts of the country will have highs that are 1 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday, topping out at 23 degrees in Seoul and over in Daejeon. Now, we are expecting sunny and warm throughout the week this week with big gaps in temperatures, so please bear that in mind. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day and Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.